Well, it looks like we've reached kind of a critical mass here for folks joining in, so we'll go ahead and get started and catch folks up as they join. So once again, this is the Advocacy 101 webinar that we are doing in support of National Emergency Management Awareness Month. So I hope everyone now, we're about 2 weeks in, is having a great awareness month, and I have seen so many great posts and shares and information on all types of social media, hearing everything that folks are doing to share who we are and what we do as emergency managers is really, really invigorating to see that there's so many people excited about this and sharing the good work that as emergency managers we do day in and day out for our communities. So we'll go ahead and get started. We got 130 people on this webinar, and that's so exciting. I'm excited about that. I'm glad that so many people are interested in this. We are going to spend an hour here talking about emergency management advocacy and what that means, what it means for you as an emergency manager, and how that can impact not just your individual community, but also how it can impact the profession of emergency management. My name is Spencer Hawkins. I'm the chair of the Government Affairs Committee for IAEM. I have been an emergency manager for a little over 25 years. Currently, I'm the director of emergency management for Macon-Bibb County, Georgia. We're in the heart of Georgia, about an hour south of Atlanta, and I've been here just over 11 years. Really, really enjoy being a member of IAM. I've been a member since I became an emergency manager, and the work that the association does on behalf of the emergency management profession is just absolutely intriguing, and just really does what we need to get done for the protection of our community and to make things happen. So as we go through, I've got an agenda and a script, but an outline of things that I want to cover as we go through this session over the next 55 minutes. But as we go through, if you have questions, if you want to expand on something I'm talking about, ask it as is. I don't want to wait until the end and then have to go back and look at that. I'd really like this to be a conversation, if you want it to be, as we go through and talk about advocacy and what that means for you as an emergency manager. So because we are virtual, if you could either, I'm monitoring the chat, so I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. If you have a question, throw it in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand function in Teams. Can everybody hear me? Can I get a thumbs up or somebody to say that they can hear me? Yeah, we got some thumbs up. All right. All right, just double checking. I should have done, all right, thank you all. I should have done an audio check at the beginning. But okay, we are good to go. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling on this. So like I said, either throw your question in the chat. Let's see, there's no way for us to unmute ourselves. There is an option here that I have that as you ask a question, I can unmute you. So go ahead. We'll start fresh. Everybody lower their hands or on the Teams function. And then as you ask a question, I've got an option here that I can unmute your mic so that you can ask your question. All right, so where did my notes go? There they are. So yeah, so that's what we'll do. We'll go through either in the chat, raise your hand, I can unmute you, and we'll do that. So, all right, let's go ahead and get rolling. Why are we here? What are we doing? We're here talking about advocacy. And when I say advocacy, in your mind, also think education. I like to use those two words interchangeably because when you start talking about advocacy, usually a lot of times the word lobbying comes into mind. And so there's a lot of people, especially in state and local governments, are not allowed to quote unquote lobby and do things for elected officials. But we can educate. We can educate all day long. So when we talk about advocacy, think education. And advocacy isn't a talent. It is not something innate. I mean, it's not a Patrick Mahomes arm quarterback throw. Advocacy is a skill, and a skill is something that you can learn and get better at as you go through. And it's something that, as an emergency manager, it is an important skill for you to have. And this is regardless if you are a single emergency manager in a small rural community who is doing the good work to protect your community, or you are the member of a large emergency management team in a major metropolitan area. Both organizations, both emergency managers need to have this advocacy skill in their toolbox. And it's not necessarily focused on just being a political activity. It is about day-to-day operational needs. And we're going to talk about that and what that looks like as we go through. So one of the things that is really important as we go through and talk about advocacy is understanding that as a member of IAEM, you have an advocate in the Government Affairs Committee. It is our mission in the Government Affairs Committee to ensure that the major issues that are impacting and can have an effect on the profession of emergency management are focused on by the Government Affairs Committee. We have Thad Hughley, who is on, and I hope you can hear me now, Thad, but Thad Hughley's on the call with us today, and he is the Government Affairs Director for IAM and does just a fantastic job working with us and kind of leading that charge with all of us as volunteers on the committee to ensure that we can see, to ensure that we see what's important and how we can make that impact, because there's a lot of things when we're specifically talking about the Hill and the federal side of legislation. When we're talking about that side, there's a lot that happens and it can be complicated. And so that's what the Government Affairs Committees does, is kind of distills that information and really brings that information back to the membership to say, hey, this is important. This is what we're going to focus on. But at the same time, what do you want to see? What's important to you? Got a question. How can we join that group? Can you drop the info into the chat? All right, here, let me drop in the chat. Email me, the IAM email. It's govaffairs@iaem.com. Email me there and ask to join, that you want to be a member of the Government Affairs Committee. We would love to have you as a member of the Government Affairs Committee. We're always looking for new members to get excited about and to really understand, because this stuff can be confusing. And so like I said, we do our job the best way we can to distill what's important to you, kind of break through all the noise and get that information. And nothing has been more true than the last 2 or so years that we've gone through an emergency management. Everything from the FEMA Review Council to the FEMA Act to the changing leadership at FEMA. It's been a lot for all of us to go through. I remember last year, Mary Jo Flynn Nevis was the Government Affairs Chair, and she did a fantastic job leading the efforts to try to get through everything last year. And I'm hazarding to do the same to make sure that we're kind of cutting through all the noise and get to the heart of what's important. So that's where we are with government affairs. We're going to talk about demystifying, what this looks like for advocacy and what we're going to do. What are some of the day-to-day things that you can do as a local emergency manager as far as advocacy goes. And when I say local emergency manager, I want to level set here. I'm not talking about a local government emergency manager. I'm talking about an emergency manager who works in their community. You could be an emergency manager who works for a private industry. an emergency manager who is a volunteer with the American Red Cross. You could be an emergency manager who works at a hospital system or a utility. All of us are valid emergency managers. And so when I talk about local emergency management, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you are a person who is working to really connect with your community and protect your community, whatever your community may be. If you've got 9 counties within your Red Cross footprint, that's your community, that's your locality that you're working on. And then also want to give you some practical tools and resources to make this work and talk about this. So we talked a little bit about the legislative advocacy versus lobbying. And like I said, remember, advocacy, think advocacy, think education. We're here to educate and talk to people about emergency management. And I'm telling you, after 25 years and meeting thousands of emergency managers, we love to talk about emergency management. And that's great. One of the things that we've done kind of to our hindrance and to our benefit is we really only talk to ourselves. We're insular and we loved, I mean, some of the LinkedIn conversations I've been in are fantastic, but I would love to see that posted on a more public page or talking to the decision makers that make the decisions for our agencies and organizations. And so that's where we come in, that's where this comes into play. How do we take these really great conversations that we have in emergency management and talk about this and share that with elected officials? How are we educating those elected officials as emergency managers, as local emergency managers? Now, one of the things before we get moving, every jurisdiction, organization, agency is different and unique. I would strongly advise you to check with either your supervisor, your legal counsel. Some organizations have, government affairs organizations within theirs. Talk to them first before you just blaze a trail right to your U.S. House Representative's office to start talking about emergency management. Find out what that context is, find out what that bigger conversation looks like for your organization, and see how you can be a part of that. With all of this, I do not want to get anybody sideways of any of their organizations. So please have that conversation first with, like I said, your supervisor, your director, your legal team, whoever it is. Say, hey, this is what I want to do. It's important to me. What are my parameters on making this happen? So make sure you have that conversation first on what you can and can't do when you're talking about advocacy and educating elected officials. So, all right. We've checked that box. We've already talked. We know exactly what we can do and can't do. Our agency head just said, yep, go through as long as you're not talking about specific policies or procedures and you're not lobbying to try to get things done, go forth and prosper. So yeah, so we've talked about that. So the reason we're doing this is we need a seat at the table. I always tell everybody, we are the new kids on the block when it comes to public safety. Law enforcement, fire service have been around for literally hundreds of years doing their work. EMS, decades upon decades of doing this. I always kind of count our birthday as 1979 when Jimmy Carter formed FEMA. So we're closing in on our 50th year, on our 50 years in emergency management. And it's something that we're still working on, and we're still trying to make sure that we have that seat at the table. And so this can really make an impact on how and what you do when you're talking about your own organization. Ensuring that everybody understands that the disaster life cycle is important, that we as emergency managers are not just behind the pane of glass that says break in case of emergency. We are here doing this good work 24/7, 365, 7 days a week for the benefit of our community. The other thing that's really important that's also taken place in the last couple of years is this shift towards an emphasis on local response, that's state and local response. So now is a great time for us to really up our game, raise our profile, and help people understand just how important we are in our community, in our profession. Somebody posted a photo here in the chat. Emergency management is not is a profession, not a position. You are 100% correct. We are a profession, and we are professionals that do this work day in and day out. It's important as you're moving forward through and understanding advocacy. What is that policy life cycle? A lot of us are very familiar with like fiscal years. Our fiscal year, starts in July and ends in June or something like that, and what you can and can't do. But there's also a policy life cycle. When does your local town create agendas? When do they write their local ordinances? When does your state legislature meet? What does their calendar look like? Is it better to talk to them right before a legislative session or right after a legislative session or during it while things are happening? Understanding that policy life cycle. If there's something new that you want to introduce or something you need to get them to understand that is happening, it may be better to get with them before that legislative session starts, so that when they're talking about funding, when they're talking about allocating staff and resources, they understand how important you are in emergency management, and that when you submitted your request for an extra position, when you submitted your request for extra mitigation money or an increase in your training budget, that's important to have prior to when that starts. So let's talk about some skills and engagement strategies for advocacy. Time and time again, what I've seen be very effective when we're talking about advocacy for emergency management is telling the local story, making sure that your elected officials that you're speaking with understand your local story. Of course, you support it with facts and figures and things like that, but they are going to remember that local story that is supported by the facts and figures that you provide to them. So when you combine real world operational type events, real world situations, this is what happened. We had this response to a major blizzard, and we were short 3 snowplows. We did not have a good online mapping software. And so because of that, we were not able to get to 25% of the roads within the first 24 hours. That's how that works. Really having that kind of good marriage between the local story that's an operational incident, and then back it up with facts, figures, and statistics, because they are charged, that elected official that you're speaking with, they are charged with the protection and oversight of that same community. And so if you're explaining to them how a major incident impacted their community and how you need more operational funding to make this work, that sends that home for them. That really makes them understand that I need to really look at this. I need to give this situation, this request, more look. I need to give it more attention because this is impacting the safety of my community. When you're doing this, remember, you are probably talking to someone who maybe or maybe not understands what you do or don't do. That's, once again, one of the things we're trying to do with Emergency Management Awareness Month is raise our profile so people understand who we are and what we do. If you walked into an elected official's office and say, I'm a police officer, they know exactly what that is. I'm a firefighter, I'm a paramedic. They know exactly who you are, what you do, what that looks like. You say, I'm an emergency manager, that takes a moment. So make sure that when you're doing that, you're talking to them about what is emergency management. If they don't already know what emergency management is and what impact you have on your community and where you fit in the public safety family within your community. I always tell folks when we talk about this, we talk about raising the profile. I always say, I will know we've arrived as an emergency management profession when we have a Chicago. And that I'm talking about the TV show, because there's Chicago Med, Chicago Law, Chicago Fire. So once we have Chicago EMA, we've made it. We are there. So we'll keep moving towards that. If anybody knows anybody in Hollywood who's looking for a good show idea, I think we can come up with something. All right, we got some stuff in the chat here. Standardized vocabulary, terms, definition, requirements, and academic credentials. Absolutely. That's, I mean, it's kind of NIMS at its core. But Wasili, thank you so much, because that brings me to my next point here is when you're talking to the elected official, and this is regardless if it's your local city official, whether it's a state legislator, or whether you're speaking with somebody at the federal level, avoid the technical jargon. Okay, try not to get too super crunchy, geeky in the weeds on, we did the ICS form 214 and then the IC did this and we had the PIO do that. It's going to go over their head and they're not going to understand because they don't feel like they're part of the team. So avoid that technical jargon. Make sure you're talking to them in very plain language terms. And when you're talking to them and you're giving them this information, keep an eye out for those, nonverbal cues. Their eyes are starting to wander. They're looking down. Maybe they're glancing at their phone a little bit. Make sure. Oh, we got a couple people in the waiting room. There we go. Make sure that you have their attention. And when you're doing that, try to keep things very clear as far as how this impacts your community. All right, another comment. Investment justification is super important, also not for the position, but for the work that goes in all aspects of emergency management. Yep. The first full-time EM director for this town, and it took time building for the Board of Aldermen. Well, Allison, congratulations on being the first full-time EM director. That's wonderful that we're working towards that, and I'm so happy that your community has taken that next step to put together a full-time staff member so that you are there. So thank you for that. So we're talking, we're crafting the message of what we're doing, and then we're talking about building this relationship with your elected official. Really understanding that depending on the level of elected official you're speaking with is usually a pretty solid corollary as to the number of legislative aides or staffers or policy directors or whatever they're called that you're going to have to go through or speak with before you get to that elected official. So let me give you for an example. So I'm going to use Allison here as an example. Allison is the first full-time EM director. You've got the Board of Aldermen there that approved it. Great. It would probably be pretty easy for Allison to set a meeting with one of her aldermen on her board. And more than likely, she could probably meet directly with that alderman. I'll use myself an example. I've got a county commission, and I can really easily set a meeting, talk to one of the commissioners or the mayor, because we are a somewhat medium-sized community. We're pretty small to medium size, and we can have those direct contacts. Now we're going to go up the next level to maybe a state legislator. Depending on the length of time or the state legislator you're talking to, they may have a scheduler or somebody that kind of keeps their calendar, and you've got to talk to them first before you can get to that actual elected official. And so, work with them, talk to them, and once again, that person, let's use that scheduler for a state legislator. They are not necessarily, they're a little bit of the gatekeeper, but they just need to understand what you want to talk about. So more than likely, they just need to prep that elected official so they have good background on what's going on. And so you call up and you get in touch with this state official scheduler. Hey, my name is Spencer Hawkins, and I'm the emergency management director for Liberty County, and we just went through a major blizzard, and I've got some really great information I'd love to share with, state legislator Bruce Wayne. Let me share that information. Is there a time that I can sit either on the phone or meet them in their office to spend 15 or 20 minutes with Representative Wayne and have that conversation? Great. You can kind of go through and look at that and try to schedule that out. Then we're going to move up to the next level, to our federal level, whether it's at the House or the Senate or things like that. I would say probably 8.5 times. And Thad, you chime in if I've got my percentages wrong. 8.5% times out of 10, you are probably going to be meeting with a legislative aide or staffer versus the actual elected official. Federal legislators have huge demands on their time with everything that they're doing, the committees, the subcommittees, all the work that they're doing. They have huge demands on their time. And so while you, as the local emergency manager for Liberty County, is important, you are a constituent, you're trying to get that information out there. It's also important to understand that they've got, 100 Liberty counties in their jurisdiction or in their legislative district that they may be having to work about and coordinate with and things like that. And so you may be, when you get to that federal level, you may be working directly with a legislative aide or staffer for most of your communications and just putting information together, and they'll present that to the elected official. That's okay. A lot of times that can be really helpful because the staffer, that elected official really relies on that staffer to be the kind of the train conductor on what works and what doesn't. And so it's a real great opportunity. And usually they're easier to get to and communicate with. So you can build that relationship with a staffer or a scheduler. And so that after, several times, they can get you into talk to that elected official and things like that. All right, Thad. All right, you haven't seen the chat. Thad said correct. Don't feel like you wasted your time. If you only be able to meet with the staff, they're the ones doing most of the work anyways. So you're getting to the right person to do that. So yeah. All right, I'm trying to, let's see what we got. A couple of things here in the chat. Yeah, the governance framework does not involve as fast as the pace of emergency management itself. Tiffany, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, 2016, we've really jumped up since then. And so, yeah, really good point there on how we need to work to keep pace with what we're doing. All right, Clinton Kiltz lobbied federal legislature numerous times. It's easy to get an appointment with an aide, and many of them have a link on their website. Yeah, absolutely. It's Clinton, you're absolutely correct. You can get with those aides, schedule it out. I think one of the a silver lining, if you will, for all the craziness of COVID is we've gotten really good at virtual meetings, Zoom and Teams and Google Meet and all that. And you can jump on a 10, 15-minute Google Meet or Zoom, share some documents on the screen and have a really great conversation. And that fits into their schedule really well. So yes, we can absolutely do that. Effective communication channels. Here's the thing. As you're starting to think about reaching out to your elected official, and this is regardless if you're meeting with your alderman, town council, county commission, or the United States senator for your state, please make sure that you have a very focused message on what you want to talk about. If you go in there and you just kind of meander, and we're talking about training and staffing and mitigation, and you're kind of all over the place, that's going to get lost. And it's going to be really hard for whoever you're meeting with to follow the why. And that's the big thing is why are you here? Why are we meeting? And what do you need from me? There's a phrase that a lot of elected officials are good at saying is what's the ask? What do you want me to do for you? What do you need from me as an elected official of why I'm meeting with you? What is that ask? And if it's, your county manager or your town council, the ask is, I need a 15% increase in my budget and I need another staff person. And here's why. A, B, C, one, two, three. If you're, meeting with a state legislator, your ask is, we need clear guidance on the state's role in response from a disaster. We've had this issue and this issue, and here's some things that I think we can move forward on. Make sure that you have a very clear and concise message of why you are there. What's the ask? When you get down to those brass tacks, what do you need them to do for you? And don't feel ashamed, don't feel bashful. I mean, like, well, and kind of just, that's what they're there to do. They are your elected officials. They're there to represent you. Ask. They would much more prefer you to be very direct and honest about what you need versus trying to hem and haw and, well, I don't know. It's just, yeah, we're kind of doing okay, but I could really use like maybe another 5% in your budget. No, you need 15% this year, and next year you need another 10% budget increase. So be direct with them. All right, we've done some good things in the chat. Let me see what we got. All right, yeah, Allison, you're 100% right. Yeah, what is the ask, but what's the return on investment? So if I can get you this additional 15% in budget, what is that going to get me? This is you wash my back, I'll wash yours, relationship. I'm going to get you 15% in your more budget. Are you going to show me a 15% more prepared community? What does that look like? If, when I assign you, when I can get you another person, another staff member, what does that look like, in the return on investment for me and my community? And so, put that into place. And as you're going in, because once again, a lot of these elected officials you're going to meet with have a lot of demands on their time. You are probably the ninth meeting out of like 25 that day. And so, once again, it's not that they don't appreciate you, but you may be forgotten in the shuffle of everything. Having very focused and concise leave behind materials that talk about what you need is very important. And so if you're going in and asking for a 15% budget increase and an additional staff member, have a one pager in your hand. Don't read from the one pager. Please don't read. Have it in your head. But when you're done, hand it into them in a nice folder and say, here, this is everything we talked about. Here's background information, all of that of why I need this budget increase and this additional person. Let that leave behind, and then they can refer to it as they're going forward. So that's really, really important. And then also making sure you follow up. Give it a couple of days, follow up. If when you were in the meeting, if you had any questions, if there was a question that they asked that you didn't know off the top of your head, first and foremost, do not make up the answer. If you don't know, then say that. I'm really sorry, Representative Wayne, but I don't know the answer to that. I will take that note down. Let me get some information and I'll follow up with you, in the next couple of days, within the next week with an answer to that. That's fine. They understand that you are not Wikipedia for emergency management and know everything all the way, all the time, but make sure you follow up. And if there is something like that, follow up. If they ask a question you don't know and you need to follow up that information, follow up. And if it's getting the answer that they're looking for, if it's taking longer than expected, tell them that. Shoot them an email. Representative Wayne, thank you so much for meeting with me again last Monday. I know you asked a question about, what is the, grant policies for the mitigation grants within the state of Columbia. I'm working with our state emergency management grants person. We're working on getting that information. As soon as I have it, I will get this back to you. Didn't want to leave you hanging on that answer. Well, that shows that you are following through, that you're getting that information. And so that once again, that builds that trust. All of this is working on building that trust and building that relationship with your elected official. And once again, any level of elected official we're talking about, so that when they go to you and you go to them and you tell them something, hey, this is what's going on, they trust you. They take you at your word and they understand that you are here to protect their community. You're here to protect your community, your family, your friends, your neighbors, all of that. Um, so with all of this, one of the things that I really, and I want to leave this with you at the end of this section of what we're talking about is when you're meeting with these elected officials, um, two things. First, understand that they are a human being. And that seems kind of redundant. Of course, they are a human being. This is not a comic book movie with alien invasions. We get it. They're a human being. But think about that. They're they're more practiced at being an elected official. They know all this, but they're there to talk to you. You've got the time with them or their aides or whoever it is. Take the time to be honest with them, build that rapport, and understand that they want they wouldn't be having the meeting with you if they didn't want to know what you had to say. So take that opportunity to really understand where you're coming from and understand where they're coming from. If they have a background in public safety, maybe they were, in the military for several years before they became an elected official, or they were, they did some sort of work in, law enforcement or fire. Understand that background and, really understand where they're coming from. So once again, they're just like us. We can talk to them. We can have that conversation. Yes, for you, if this is the first time you're meeting with them, it may be a little nerve-wracking, and that's okay. Take a deep breath. They understand. They meet with nervous folks all the time, and so you can work through this. The second thing within the and it not maybe on a local level, not so bad, but as we move up into the state and especially the federal side, we'll just be honest about it, the polarization that we have in this country is really, really deep between the left, the right, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democratic, however you want to call it, the polarization is pretty deep. And understand that the person that you may need to speak with, you may disagree with them on every single thought, word, comment that comes out of their mouth. You may vehemently disagree with every thought that they have. However, they are still the decision maker. They are still the ones that can help you get that budget increase, understand that grant process, or get that grant process straightened out, figure out what's going on with the FEMA response. You are going to have to kind of pull it together. I'm just being honest and understand that while you may disagree with every single thought or idea that that person has, you still need their help because they're the ones that are that decision maker to affect your agency, your profession. And I would just once again really understand that you want to be very, very careful. If you are in this type of situation where you and this person you're meeting with are on polar opposites of everything you're talking about, focus on the facts here because regardless of which side of the political aisle or spectrum that they live on, they're still a representative of your community. And so there's an opportunity that you have there that you can make your community better and that this person can help. If you're in the meeting and, some of the comments, looks, thoughts, exasperated sighs start coming out when, the elected official starts saying something or talking about something like that, it's one of those times where it's just, take a deep breath, refocus, think about why you're there. Because I can tell you, it will turn off an elected official so quick as if you're there to ask them for something and then you start contradicting, belittling, whatever, side glances of things that they're saying, of things that they may hold very near and dear to their heart. I can say I was tested on this part several months ago. I was asked to go and testify before Senate Homeland Security Committee regarding Homeland Security or regarding some emergency management issues. They were focused on some of the California wildfires. I was asked to come up and talk about the importance of the federal, state, and local relationship and FEMA and how all of that works. And I was very focused in my opening statement. I thought it was very vanilla, just in the fact of I'm here to talk about how important it is for our communities to be prepared and how important it is for local, state, and federal to work together for the benefit and for the protection of our community. Like, I think we can all get on board with that. But then some of these elected officials had different thoughts and kind of took some of the things that I said and kind of twisted it this way or that way. And it was very frustrating that I felt like I was being, turned about in a wrong way for what I was actually there for. And that can be really difficult. And so just the ability to kind of think about it, pull it together, and just in the back of your mind, think about why you're there and what you need to do and how important it is that this person, regardless if you agree with them or not, can be of benefit to you and how it works. So um, there's that. The next thing I want to do is, and I am going to attempt to share my screen. I will be honest, I am not the best Teams person. So let me make this happen and see if we can. All right, if I've done this correctly, then everybody should see the IAM National Emergency Management Awareness Month page. Oh, I got a thumbs up. Thank you, Amanda. All right. This page, go to here or go to events, National Emergency Management Awareness Month. That brings you to this page. This is a resource for you, and it's specific on National Emergency Management Awareness Month, but I'm going to beg and plead to Josh and the board to leave this up year round because it has so much good information on how to advocate, what you can do, and how you can be a benefit. So there's information here on how to get involved. This is focused on Awareness Month, but we're going to get down here a little bit more. This is also a shameless plug for Awareness Month. And so There's a participation survey. If you're doing stuff, even if you're posting on Facebook, if you're doing, whatever it is, we want to know about it. So fill out the survey. If you do the survey, you can win cash and prizes. So we've got some Amazon gift cards here that if you fill out the participation survey, let me try that again. You can win some cash and prizes. So we've got that. There are a couple of videos here that we created that are kind of evergreen. That means they're year round. You can use them all the time. They're not time date stamped for anything. When you're meeting with your elected officials, or maybe even beforehand, emailing them some pre-read information, send them these videos. They're not long, and they talk about who emergency management is and what we are. These are great. All right, but I'm gonna get down to the advocacy stuff. So here we go. All right. Elected leader templates. So let's pull up this one. Save that. Open it up. Oh, it went to the other screen. Hold on one second. Let me slide this over. There we go. All right, so this is a way that you can start advocacy. We've got a template here that you can write to your elected official and send it to them. And 9 times out of 10, what you're going to do is you're going to put this together in a PDF and email it to them. But you can do that. So there's a template here within this page. And we've got one for kind of our local, tribal, state, federal, so our government folks. Here's a letter for private industry. If you are a private industry emergency manager, there's your opportunity, or a volunteer opportunity. Find or contact elected officials' website. So here's the website that you can find who your elected officials are. You may not know who your state legislator is. So here's how you can find out governors and legislative activities or legislative contacts for your states. So you can find out who they are and what district you're in. Here's a really good one here. I'm going to pull this up. So this is a 2-page document that we put together on the difference between about advocating and educating for emergency management, and kind of we talk about the difference between advocacy, educating, and lobbying. And there's a little bit of information here, but this is a great summary of a lot of what we talked about today on how you can advocate. And this was written specifically so that, once again, whether you're meeting with the United States Senator for your state, or you're meeting with your town council, District 5 commissioner, all this is really important. Does this person understand the role it plays in our community? What is the ask? What are some examples? Know your talking points. What should you do during the meeting, after the meeting? Build those relationships. So there's a lot of good information on this page that can help you as you either begin or continue your advocacy journey and building this skill set. And like I said, it is a skill. It is not, I will send a link to that page, the exact page. Wasila, you got it. I'm going to pull this up right here. And I'm going to paste that. And just so you know, all right, here, I'm going to do we'll share this again. We got a couple more minutes. All right, so we're sharing again. All right, here's our main page, iam.org. Everybody can navigate to that. You go to events, National Emergency Management Awareness Month. Click here. There it is right there. There's also a public awareness campaign page, which is the Know Your EM. And so this is another area that this is a website, and I'll link that here in the chat too, that you could send to that elected official or staffer or whoever it is to get them information about who you are and what you do as kind of a pre-read before you meet with them. What is emergency management? What does that look like? Where to find us? All that kind of good information. So All right, I have got 7 minutes left in this webinar. I've been doing a ton of talking, but I think we've had some good chat conversations. Whoever's the Municipal Emergency Management Caucus Chair, apologies for not, I don't know everyone's name right now, but thank you for posting that link in there. Um, yeah, that's, like I said, that's your contact for finding elected officials. So now I'm going to stop talking. I would love to hear some questions about good, the bad, the ugly, what's going on. Looks like I'm going to open up the Q&A section here. Let's see. Thompson, is this open to international advocacy participation or is it just US based? Thompson, to your question, I think if you are an emergency manager and you are concerned about your community and you need help from an elected official, yeah, I think this is open to anybody. The what we talked about today, kind of cuts across the board. Everybody's got an elected official for the most part in the world, on who can impact your community and your emergency management agency. So yeah, reach out, talk to them, find out, what's important to them and going from there. All right, let's see. All right, Wasili, is there a federal law that defines what legally is emergency management? There is FEMA is we have FEMA, we've got the Stafford Act, that kind of details, who we are and what we do. But when we're talking local emergency management and state emergency management really looks different community to community. And so I would advise you to really dig in locally and find out what's important to you and where you need to look for some of that information. Are you planning on hosting a 201? Sierra, thank you for that. Help Bill talk about today regarding legislative advocacy, maybe with regional perspective, like the Pacific Northwest, East Coast versus Southwest, different strategies for different areas of the country. Yes, I think we can start looking at a 201. I don't know if it'll happen this month. It probably won't happen this month, but we can look at putting something together. We, had about 130 or so folks that were engaged in this call, and that was wonderful. I woke up this morning going, "Oh my God, nobody's going to show up." But 136 of you showed up, which is awesome. Oh, you put a time limit on me, Sierra. Anytime before next spring would be great. All right. I will work with the team and we can see what we can come up with and kind of go from there. But I would say, yeah, some regional perspectives would be important to look at. But I would say when we're talking about basic 101 advocacy, emergency management and the protection of your community kind of cuts across the board, whether it's, here in Georgia, up in Rhode Island, in Arizona, or Kansas City, Missouri. The disasters may have a different flavor. My hometown of Kansas City, Missouri is not dealing with, hurricanes, but we all have tornadoes that we're dealing with, or, I'm not dealing with blizzards like some of my friends up in, the north. So that's something that you can kind of look at. But the profession of emergency management and what we do as a profession, what we do as a community to ensure that our family, friends, neighbors are safe from hurricanes, floods, fires, pandemics, tsunamis, earthquakes, blizzards, whatever it may be, kind of cuts across any of those regional impacts. Yeah, we can definitely look at a 201. We'll see that. All right, Sierra, I am drafting you into service. Shoot me an email on the gov affairs at iem.com and we'll talk. Let's see, what's charity say? Our association goes to DC in February and March to promote EMA. We would love to see more states there. Yeah, charity, shoot us some information. We're doing fly-ins and things like that over the next year. So if we can kind of, collaborate and we'll do a little Captain Planet. Let our powers combine and put some stuff together. That would be really cool. Since we get a cohort together and have legislator day or something like that nationwide. Yeah, we just had, and once again, there's so much, I didn't get a chance to talk about it. We just had a cohort up in DC a few weeks ago that Thad spearheaded for us, and they got to listen to some of the conversation, some of the Senate subcommittee on the FEMA Act. They met with a ton of legislators, actually even met with, I think, Senator Langford from Oklahoma, and had some really good conversations there. And so, yeah, we have that cohort is coming together. We are making those Capitol Hill visit fly-in days happen. We'll make sure that we get some more information out to the community on that and to the membership on how it is and what things go there. All right, let's got here. What are some general protocols to consider when meeting with an official? Anything to avoid? I think, like I said, right now the big thing would be, I would not be too overly political on either one side of the spectrum or the other. Try to keep your facts as those facts. Try to keep your stories, very focused on here's what happened, here's what we need, here's some great things that happened. Let me talk about how great it is of all the things that we did that was really hard. And then here's where we need some help. And then if there's any do a little research on whoever you're meeting with. Do a little research. If, for example, if the person you're meeting with is an absolutist that taxes in my community will never be raised, then I probably wouldn't bring up a tax increase to pay for your budget increase. Something like that, may not be the best thing, but just do a little research, find out what's important to them. Let's see, Clinton, do you offer a newsletter, email, or something that tells you what issues IM is advocating for our behalf? Secondary to that, is there a forum members can request advocacy for everyone? Yeah, Clinton, the Government Affairs Committee. I'll put my the email in the chat again. And yeah, we've got information on our page, on the IM Connect page. If you've not been to IM Connect, that's another shameless plug. Please go there. We've got a lot of really good information on the IM Connect page that we can share. You can share about what we're working on, what we're focused on, things like that. Also, if you go to, and I know we're over time, so if you want to hang with me, I'll give it a few more minutes. Also, if you go to the main IEM page under Advocacy, there's a link that says Legislative Priorities. And so that is available there that you can see what the legislative priorities are. And we do them by Congress, not annually, but we do it by Congress. Wasili, my name is Spencer Hawkins. I am going to put that in the chat as well, so you can see that. But yeah, I would avoid the word expensive. Probably a good opportunity. All right. If there is nothing else, I appreciate your time and your focus on this. I love the conversation. I love what we talked about today. And just please don't be afraid. Start small. Meet with your town council or something like that, and then you can work your way up. But if you need something, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share any information I have. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.